Mr. Layeni was on probation from Albany County, out of Albany County, for a reckless driving misdemeanor conviction for a reckless driving incident that occurred in December of 2022. He's had police contacts in Troy and in Colony. And so with that, I want to introduce our Deputy Chief that oversees our Office of Professional Standards, Deputy Chief Anthony Patuello, to give context about the internal investigation that we'll have regarding this incident. Because as I explained yesterday, this incident will be investigated at a number of different levels. The New York State Attorney General's office has already started their investigation of this, and the Albany Police Department has started an internal investigation. And I'm going to call it Deputy Chief Patuello up just to give some context about the internal investigation that we will be conducting.
Thank you, Chief. Good morning. In full disclosure, I'm going to be very limited in what I can and cannot answer this morning. As many know, we have an active and ongoing investigation, not only on the criminal side, but also administratively. We also have an active investigation from the State Attorney General's office. With the administrative investigation, we're going to be doing a lot of interviews when the appropriate time arises. Evidence is being collected currently, as it has been since the incident occurred. As far as the process goes, it's lengthy. We'll do a complete and thorough investigation onto the matter, and it will mirror our criminal investigation, again, which is active at this time. Any questions anybody has?
At this point, do you know how many shots the officer fired when he returned fire?
I do not at this time, no.
Did the suspect give any indication that he was looking for a confrontation with the police? Has there been any indication that he was looking to commit suicide by the police officer?
We have working theories, obviously, for how this incident unfolded, but at this time, there's no further comment.
Do you know how long between the initial exchange between the individuals and the self-inflicted gunshot wound in terms of time frame?
Seconds. I'm not comfortable in determining the exact time frame right now, but it is seconds.
Deputy Chief, Officer Damphier, he was the only officer who discharged his weapon, correct?
That's correct.
Do you know how long it took for other units to arrive to the scene?
Again, seconds from when the incident occurred, and he was under attack.
Do you have any information on who owned the vehicle he was driving?
At this point in time, again, it's under investigation. We do have that information, not readily to release that at this time.
The weapons, can you say they were illegal? Were those specifically stolen, or were those ghost guns, or were he simply not supposed to have them because of his probation?
Again, that would be a condition of the probation, of course, but that is part of the criminal investigation, and at this point in time, it's just not appropriate for me to release that.
Do they know what the suspect was speeding away from when the officer first spotted him?
That's unknown at this time.
Did the officer injure the suspect in any way in gunfire or?
So with respect to that question, from the autopsy, there's evidence that the suspect in this case sustained a graze wound to his body that was consistent with a gunshot, and so that's what we're looking at this point concerning that. And regarding the issue with the weapons that we recovered, they were illegal in the sense that the suspect did not have legal authority to have possession of those weapons, and two of those weapons actually had serial numbers that are affixed upon them, so we can track where at least where the upper part of that weapon was manufactured, sold, and who owned it, who purchased it in that sense. The third weapon was a total ghost gun in the way that we use it, in the sense that there were no serial numbers affixed to it, and there's no way to track it whatsoever. But all three of the weapons were illegally possessed, nonetheless.
Chief, I understand that you guys don't intend to release additional footage today. Can you explain a little bit more Every incident is different, but in those past incidents, when officers have used physical force against suspects, you have released that footage. So can you explain again why you chose not to in this incident?
And I think we're consistent with how we've treated other officer-involved incidents. And I'll go back to the last two officer-involved shootings that we had. And we had one where an officer was being approached by an individual who had a knife. The officer discharged his weapon when the individual got within feet of that officer. And we stopped that video, the public part of the video, just before the shots were fired and just before that suspect was struck, out of respect for the suspect's family. Because we understand that, although the suspect may have committed a horrific act, they still have family members who weren't a part of that. And we like to be sensitive to our family, to family members of incidents like this. The next one we had, where a suspect actually brutally stabbed an officer, and one of the officer's partners had to use deadly force in order to stop that assault, meaning that officer had to use his firearm in order to stop it. When we publicly showed that video, we stopped that video right before the suspect was shot, out of respect to that suspect's family. So in this case, we feel that we've got to give our officers' families that same deference. And it was agonizing to listen to what that officer was going through after that officer was shot. I've been in this for a long time, and that was agonizing and just hard to listen from anybody, whether they're an officer or not. What that officer was going through was just horrific. And out of respect to that officer's family, I felt that I wanted to give that officer's family the same deference that I gave families of suspects in cases like this, so that they don't have to listen to their loved one go through that agony and relive this all over again and have to go through some more additional trauma that they're already going through. And so while we would have liked to have played the whole thing, and I think at some point, probably through discovery and things like that, it'll probably get out. But I didn't want to be the one to add to the trauma that our officer's family was going through, just like we didn't want to add to the trauma that the families of suspects in these cases were going through as well.
Can you say whether the officer's body camera footage caught the suspect killing himself? In other words, does it appear on the body camera footage? Does it show him committing suicide, or was that off screen?
I'll have to review it again. I don't know at this point. What I can tell you though is that from my review of the body worn camera, it clearly shows what we saw yesterday. The suspect fired his handgun at the officer a couple of times, struck the officer. It also clearly shows the officer returning fire. So the officer did respond with discharging his firearm during that incident. And so beyond that, I think it'd take a little bit more investigative work to figure out after that. And that's why I was very intentional and deliberate in some of my comments the last couple of days, or the last day regarding this, is because we want to make sure that this investigation flows like it should, so that we're not speculating about what happened, and that we're letting data come through. We're letting this evidence kind of takes us where it needs to be, and so far it's worked. We knew at the very outset that there was an exchange of gunfire. We didn't know quite the nature of it. We didn't know quite at that point if the officer's discharge of his weapon had actually caused the death of the suspect. We didn't know it conclusively, but we knew the information that we had. Now, there were some inferences that the officer killed the suspect, but I was very intentional in what I said about it. And I'm being very intentional now and deliberate about what I say at this point, because the investigation, like the Deputy Chief said, is still ongoing. And there's still potentially some things that we don't know right now that could be uncovered. But having said that, I'm very confident that with the investigation by this New York State Attorney General's office, by the investigation that our internal officers are conducting, led by Deputy Chief Batuello, and also by the review by our Civilian Police Review Board. We've got a lot of eyes on this. You know, nothing will be missed. And so in time, all of the questions that you have and that others have about this, that'll all come out. But I'm just very, very deliberate and intentional and sensitive to other matters in terms of the information that I'm publicly revealing regarding this incident.
Can you provide an update on the officer's condition as he's being released from the hospital?
Don't know when he's being released, but from what I learned yesterday, surgery went well. The officer is in good spirits. The prognosis is positive, and you know, hopefully, you know, we can get this officer recovered soon and back on the job.
Was that the only interaction between the two, the suspect and the officer, when we saw that was released publicly?
Yes, yes.
What was the nature of the responding officer's interaction with the suspect?
That I don't know at this point, but the responding officers that came, you know, they secure the scene, obviously. You know, they make sure that there are no other suspects that are around, and, you know, render aid. You know, that was one of the first things that the first responding officers were doing, because our officer was, you know, he'd already transmitted over the police radio that he had been shot. You know, it was clear that he was in agony, and so the first officers there are, you know, rendering aid to that to the officer, but also you know, any aid that's necessary with the suspect at that point as well. So that's typical of what officers would do now, until we, you know, go through the rest of, you know, the investigation, until we look at all of the body-worn cameras and conduct all of the interviews with all of the officers. And again, Deputy Chief Batuello kind of alluded to this. You know, we still have, you know, a lengthy process in interviewing everybody who was there to find out exactly where they was there. But one thing that I want to make very clear is that the interaction between the officer and the suspect in terms of the lethal force component of this, as far as we know, with the evidence has shown so far, that was the extent of the lethal force part of this interaction. Now, what the officers were doing and exactly where they were and what they were doing in the aftermath when they arrived on the scene, we'll find that out after interviews.
What's protocol for mental health, both while the officers in the hospital right now?
So we have it. In fact, I'll let Deputy Chief Batuello talk about. We have an after-action plan right now with concerning looking at the incident itself, but also some EAP aspects of this, and I'll let him talk about that.
Yeah, so we have a very robust officer wellness program that's been, you know, rejuvenated, reinvented over the last couple of years. So those officers that are connected with that program have been in touch with Officer Damphier and his family, as well as the other officers involved, not only from that incident, but learning about this in the aftermath. It's traumatic, to say the least, and you know, they're there to assist them in dealing and coping with this incident, because, like I said, it's traumatic. We haven't had an officer in this department be struck by gunfire in over 20 years. So this is something that's new territory to a lot of our membership, and we do have in the coming days some internal debriefs that will be conducted, not only on the employee assistance program side of the house, but also from an operational level.
From this point in time, does it seem that the officer within his training responded within reason?
My preliminary assessment is yes. Yep, absolutely. And so with that, I'll turn it over to the mayor.
Thank you, Chief. And again, I want to commend the department for its swift action and its transparency with respect to this incident. As the Deputy Chief said, we've not had an officer struck by gunfire in 2 decades in the city of Albany. And so this is, for all of us, newer territory, especially given that we have a relatively young department. And so we will continue to ensure that we're doing all that we can for the mental health and to learn from this incident as we move forward. I also want to add that we have every indication that the assailant in this case had a history of mental health issues. and that when we are looking at the challenges that our police department faces, I talk about it all the time, and now sadly I have an example of the danger that our officers face every time they make a call. And we need to ensure that we are doing more to address the mental health crisis that exists in every community across this state and across this country. It happened to land in an incident that could have been far worse here in the city of Albany, but when we talk about examples of the combination of mental illness and guns, we continue to see the devastation that it can have on communities, on families, and in this instance, on the entire Albany Police Department. And our residents have been reaching out. They have been expressing their concern for our officers, commending the chief and the department for their hard work. But this is, again, an issue that is much bigger than this one incident, but it is a continued, I call it a wake-up call. I don't know how many more wake-up calls we need. But this is certainly another incident where we have somebody who is struggling with mental illness, sadly took their own life, but shot a police officer in the throes of whatever he was experiencing. And we will continue to work with our partners at Albany County to ensure that the Albany County Department of Mental Health and that the resources that they have and that we have at the state level address this ongoing mental health crisis and mental health emergency that we have here in this country.
Chief, two clarifications on
Yes.
previous answers. You said that 2 of the guns had serial numbers that would allow you to trace them. So those were not taken off. Those serial numbers were clear on the guns. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. The second clarification is the suspect fired 2 shots at the officer, struck him once, and then at some point shot himself. Do you have any indication at this point that he fired any other shots?
I don't know, and this is another area where I want to be very careful in public comments regarding this, because I think it's important at this point to let our investigators do their jobs, and they've been doing a fantastic job so far. So the short answer to that is I don't know, but the real answer is that it will come out. We will find out. They're already analyzing some of the shell casings. We're looking at video. There's other forensic type of investigative aspects of this that they're looking into, and so that answer will come out. I just don't want to speculate at this time.
And I want to press you one more time.
Yes.
I understand trying to be respectful of the officer's family. Why couldn't the department show the video muted or in some way that allows the public to better understand what happened here while still respecting what the family is going through right now?
We don't want to have too many redactions to it. There's one thing to splice a video, stop it at a certain point, but when you're taking away audio and showing a video, we wanted to present it in as pure form as we could, so that people see it as we saw it, but also by being very sensitive to some of those areas that that the family would absolutely be a little bit concerned about. And so it's not trying to hide anything. I think we've been very transparent with how we've handled this so far. Within hours, the mayor and I are giving statements about this, and it's not investigation is continuing type answers. We're being as forthright as we can, as transparent as we can. Within hours, we're showing the video itself. When it would have been reasonable if we were concerned about some of those things to just withhold the whole thing until we were ready to put it out. But I felt that it was important to put something out there so that people will have some context about what happened. Now, you know, again, it just wasn't appropriate to put the whole thing out. In time, that will come, but it wasn't that we were trying to hide anything. It truly is, and it truly was, sensitivity issues, just like we showed sensitivity to others who were considered suspects in these, in their families. I wanted to give that same sensitivity to our families of our officer, and I don't think it took away from the public's understanding of what happened. You know, the basic, because the basic facts of this haven't changed. You know, this officer was conducting what is considered a routine traffic stop, or a routine investigation of a traffic stop, and was ambushed, got shot, and returned fire. Those basic facts haven't changed. And now, what happened, how many shots he fired, and you know, where they struck, and things like that. You know, all those things are going to come out. We're not suppressing anything, but we just want to just give. It takes some time for the appropriate disclosure of all those things, and we just want to make sure when it's done, that it's done the right way, and that we're not doing things that either A, compromise an investigation, or two, further traumatize a family that's going through a tremendous amount right now.
Yeah, and if I could just add, because, I have been asked as mayor, what do you tell, or what do you want from the police department with respect to releasing these videos? I have seen the entire video. I agreed that watching that is painful, and it would be incredibly painful for the family, especially given how close we are to this incident occurring. The second piece of this, though, is, as we were awaiting the autopsy results, there was certainly an expectation of the possibility that this suspect died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, and the possibility that the officers firing on the suspect had nothing to do with his cause of death. And that has been proved out by the autopsy. We may have been having a different conversation if the officer's gunfire had led to an injury, a serious injury, or to the death of this individual, but it did not. And so, again, these are the types of considerations that we take into account. This is a difficult time for this department. It's a difficult time for this officer. It's a difficult time for his family. But were we talking about a scenario where his actions had caused the death of this individual, we would be having a different conversation. So that is why these are nuanced, and we seek to be as transparent as possible so that the public has the information that they need to understand and know that this has been investigated and that it will continue to be fully investigated.
Time for one more question.
Would it be worth releasing any body cam from the responding officers to help fill maybe some of those gaps?
At this point, no. That'll be obviously included in part of the entire investigation. And as I mentioned before, to a question, all of these are going to come out in time. Through discovery or however they may come out. And so it's not about suppressing any information. It truly is about timing. It's about sensitivity. It's about making sure that we allow these investigators to do their jobs. And I'm 100% confident with this being investigated and looked at so many different levels. None of this is going to be missed. It's the state attorney general's office personnel. They're going to have access to all of these videos. They're going to have access to every piece of information that we have. Our civilian review board, if they choose to investigate this, they'll have that same type of access, and obviously our internal officers. So nothing will be missed. I just urge patience with respect to what the public wants, how much more information they want with this. But again, I think I'm confident that we've taken some steps to make sure that we're transparent and that we're getting some information out. We're getting out timely. Again, within hours, we're giving out this information. Within hours, we're redacting and cutting to make sure that we can get the video out in a way that's not insensitive and that doesn't compromise an investigation. But sir, in time, that information will come out.
Chief, do you mind just spelling the suspect's name one more time for me?